Is the system down? That's the first thing I heard through the thin wall of the break room as I walked in on a Monday morning that was supposed to be just another day of keeping the whole damn dealership from falling apart. Not a hello, not a good morning, just panic, already starting to boil. Service desk staff tapping on screens that wouldn't load. Salesmen circling like headless chickens. Phones ringing with no answers. I knew something was off before I even set my bag down. And then came the click. My key card. Dead. No green light, no access, just a red blink, like the place I'd spent 9 years building had suddenly decided I didn't belong. I stood there, badge still pressed against the reader, feeling like I'd been erased from my own blueprint. Brandon was standing at the reception desk, arms folded, like a guy who thinks posturing equals leadership. "You weren't at the party," he said, flat. No greeting, no context. Just that smug, calculated tone that makes your skin itch. We celebrated 20 years of Fox Lane. Greg found it disrespectful. We're moving in a different direction. Let me be clear, I skipped the party because it overlapped with a major system batch sync and audit I had scheduled 2 months ago. You know, the one that ensures the financing queues don't collapse mid-deal and payroll doesn't misfire into tax fraud land. But explaining that felt like explaining oxygen to a fire. Brandon didn't want logic. He wanted obedience. I left without a word. Didn't yell, didn't cry, just turned and walked to my car like someone getting out of a burning building before the roof caved in. But I wasn't done. Not by a mile. If you're still listening, take a second to subscribe and like the video. 97% of folks listen without subscribing. And yeah, it actually helps the team keep going. Thanks for that. Now, I'd like to say I had planned it all in advance, that I knew they'd toss me the second I missed their catered kumbaya. Truth is, I built the architecture with a simple rule in mind. Don't give away what no one values. Lease it. So years ago, I structured the system licenses under a limited steward agreement, platform stewardship clauses, reversion protocols, all above board, all ignored by Brandon and his crew of LinkedIn-certified visionaries. That morning, I slid one envelope across his desk before leaving. Cream paper, centered text, no threats, just 4 words on the outside. System ownership transfer, 50 hours. Inside, the clause triggers, default protocols. A polite reminder that in 50 hours without active renewal, sync privileges would quietly dissolve. They probably thought it was a bluff. That I'd come crawling back. That people like me don't walk away from comfort, even when it spits in our face. They were wrong, because the thing about systems that run themselves, they do until they don't. And when they stop, it's not with a bang. It's with silence. The kind that makes people start whispering. The kind that makes calls go unreturned. The kind that resets a dealership back to 1997 while the front desk Googles how to reboot a finance scheduler. They had 50 hours. 50. And the clock was already ticking. They had a string quartet playing Coldplay covers in the goddamn showroom. That's how serious Brandon took this 20-year milestone. Champagne pyramids, shrimp towers, custom-printed Fox Lane Motors cocktail napkins with Greg's face on one side and built by family on the other. I saw photos later, the kind you post when you're trying to convince people you're loved instead of just tolerated. The entire place looked like a wedding reception for a company that never loved its own backbone. But I wasn't there. I was in the backroom server cage at 9:47 p.m., hunched over a tangled mess of Ethernet and patch logs, verifying that the quarterly sync had finished pushing updates to our financing matrix. The same financing matrix that, if misaligned by even 0.5%, could delay every loan approval by days. And Brandon knew that. I emailed him the audit calendar 6 weeks ago. Hell, he replied with a thumbs up emoji and, sounds good, thanks. But I guess once the band got booked and the bourbon fountain rolled in, the woman who kept the system breathing didn't fit the aesthetic anymore. Next morning, I show up at 8:03, keycard still dead. Only this time, security's standing there like they're guarding Fort Knox, and not the good guys either, the type that get off on blocking women half their size from entering their own damn workplace. Brandon wants you in Greg's office, one of them said without looking me in the eye. So I walked. Past the freshly polished showroom, past the glittery banner still flapping above the sales floor, past 2 junior techs whispering like I was already a ghost. I stepped into Greg's office and immediately knew it wasn't going to be a conversation. It was a script. And I wasn't holding the pen. He didn't even offer me a seat. Greg, the man who once called me the best investment Fox Lane ever made, couldn't look me in the eye as he stood behind that oversized desk like he was casting for a mob film. "You disrespected the family," he said. Not a greeting, not a question, just a sentence wrapped in syrupy fake disappointment. 20 years and you couldn't show up for one night? I had the audit. The matrix was sinking. He held up a hand like I was a child who needed to be quiet during grown-up time. We needed presence. You gave us absence. That was it. No mention of the overtime. No nod to the times I patched systems from my damn hospital bed after surgery. Just that, a vaguely threatening sermon about family and values and loyalty while standing in an office I helped wire for secure data flow back in 2014. I hope you understand. You're done here, Greg said, as if he was comforting himself more than delivering a decision. I didn't argue. Arguing would imply I thought this was about me. It wasn't. This was Brandon's theater, Greg's cowardice, and a dealership too full of itself to notice the gears grinding beneath their show floor. So I walked. Not out of shame, out of clarity, because if they thought I was just some admin who plugged in wires and crossed fingers for miracles, they were about to learn the difference between a platform user and a system steward. One builds, the other leeches. And when builders walk away, the lights may stay on for a bit, the champagne may still fizz, but the heartbeat, it goes flat. I walked out without slamming a door, raising a voice, or asking a single goddamn question. You know why? Because you don't plead with a machine that already decided your spare parts. And Fox Lane Motors? They'd been running on borrowed logic for years. Logic I built, tested, patched, protected, and licensed under my own name. Quietly, carefully, legally. Because when you're a woman in tech surrounded by men who treat competence like a threat, you build your exits before they think of slamming the door. Brandon was in the conference room playing boss with a PowerPoint presentation titled Next Gen Synergy. I didn't need to hear it. I already knew the pitch. Slash legacy, install whatever free software gives them the illusion of control, then take credit until it breaks. Rinse, repeat. He was going to learn the hard way that not every legacy system is just duct tape and nostalgia. So I walked past his desk, calm as a librarian, and placed one cream-colored envelope dead center, where his Starbucks cup usually sat. No wax seal, no dramatic post-it, just printed block text on the front. System ownership transfer, 50 hours. Inside was the one-page reversion clause. The same one I'd written 5 years ago when they asked me to build the orchestration suite that ran everything. Parts, leasing, payroll timing, VIN registration, delivery syncing, the whole thing. I gave them full operational use. Under an annually renewable license, platform stewardship remained mine, not symbolic, not sentimental, legal. They never bothered to renew it this year. Missed the email. Missed the reminder notice. Too busy ordering shrimp towers and swag jackets, I guess. So I included a nice reminder in the envelope. In the absence of acknowledgement or transfer confirmation, sync privileges will expire 50 hours from system steward termination. Reversion will not impact existing local data, but will suspend cloud-integrated operations until renewal or transfer is complete. No threats. No revenge language, just clean, dry protocol. The kind that gets missed until everything stops working and someone finally reads the fine print on the bottom of a vendor screen. Then I left. No victory lap, no email blast. Just me walking out the same back door I used to enter unnoticed every Sunday night for system maintenance. Same worn-out sneakers, same weathered laptop bag. Except this time, I wasn't returning. On the drive home, I didn't blast angry music or call a friend to vent. I just listened to the hum of my own engine and thought about how long I'd ignored the signs, Brandon pretending to reorganize, Greg growing distant, the sudden compliance reviews I wasn't invited to. And I let that hum carry me all the way home, where I finally exhaled. 50 hours. That's all they had. 50. And it had already started. At hour 13, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee I didn't have to reheat twice. First time in months. There's something almost holy about that first sip when your name's no longer on someone else's schedule. No urgent Slack pings. No Brandon barging in with quick ideas that somehow cost me 4 hours of cleanup. Just coffee, the breeze, and silence. Meanwhile, back at Fox Lane, the silence was starting to hum. It began subtle, like a flicker in the corner of your eye. The service desk's display board, the one that listed current appointments, technician assignments, and wait times, suddenly started looping. Customers who'd checked in vanished from the screen. New appointments pinged twice or not at all. One poor guy supposedly had his oil change completed before he even arrived. They rebooted the system 3 times. The error persisted. Hour 19, things got weirder. Inventory mismatches popped up. Parts that were scanned in showed as pending arrival. Meanwhile, boxes already on shelves were labeled as missing. A tech logged a warranty repair and watched the VIN lookup freeze mid-search. Then, one of the junior managers printed a report for Greg, only to see every third line replaced with "NOAA response." By hour 28, nothing could be finalized. Leasing paperwork would load, but signatures wouldn't trigger the automated finance sync. Credit checks stalled. Customers waited for the confirmation emails that never arrived. Salespeople stood helpless with contracts halfway printed, blinking at screens like kids watching a magician saw someone in half. "Just print it and I'll sign later" doesn't fly when you're dealing with 6-figure luxury vehicles and lean-backed financing. Brandon, in his infinite wisdom, barked across the office. "Call it. Fix it. Now." Poor Jorge from internal support gave it a valiant effort. He tried patching modules, restoring backups, even re-authenticating admin tokens. But every time he touched the orchestration terminal, the real heartbeat of the system, he hit the same wall. The admin shell wasn't just locked. It was sealed with a phrase that pulsed in clean white text on a black screen. "Transfer requires acknowledgement from prior steward." No login, no bypass, no reset flow, just that line, sitting there like a dare. That's when I got the first call. Unknown number, straight to voicemail, then a text. "Hi, urgent, can you talk?" No name, but I knew the number. Jorge. I imagined him sitting there in that glass box of a tech room, sweating through his button-down while Brandon loomed behind him like a cartoon villain with a Bluetooth headset. I didn't reply. Because here's the truth about being invisible for 9 years. They only notice you when things break. And I built the damn thing so well they forgot it could break. Forgot it wasn't magic. Forgot it was leased, not gifted. But it was breaking now. Not with explosions, but with unraveling threads. Each one snapping in perfect silence. And the more they pulled, the less they understood. Hour 29 was coming fast. So was the next snap. Hour 31 hit like a cold slap across the dealership's perfectly polished face. Greg's Lexus hadn't even cooled off in his reserved spot before the bank liaison pulled up in a gray sedan that looked like it judged everyone it passed. Alyssa from Ridgetop Financial, the kind of woman who carried a clipboard like a weapon and smiled like she had spreadsheets behind her teeth. She wasn't there for coffee. She asked for a seat in the finance bay and logged into her pre-approval matrix. Nothing loaded. And I mean nothing. The grid that usually syncs lease-to-income ratios and financing terms across 4 banks sat there like a corpse. Fields blank. Rates missing. Flags misfiring. Alyssa tried a hard refresh, then again with VPN override. Then she picked up her phone and dialed someone I guarantee wears more pinstripes than Greg's entire wardrobe. 2 minutes later, she stood up and said flatly, "We're pausing approvals until sync integrity is confirmed." At that exact moment, 3 families were sitting at sales desks halfway through paperwork. I imagined the sudden stop was awkward. Then the shouting started. Greg's office door slammed. I wasn't there, but someone I used to mentor, Lonnie in financing, texted me just 2 words. "It's happening." Apparently, Brandon got dragged into Greg's office like a kid who set the backyard on fire. Nobody was yelling about loyalty anymore. Now it was, "What the hell is wrong with the system?" And "You told me it was covered." Greg had that voice that cracked under pressure, the one that starts slow and ends in wheezing syllables. I could picture it like a scene I'd already watched. Finger pointing, the "we pay her too much," rationale curdling in his throat as he realized how much I'd actually been shielding them from collapse. Meanwhile, Jorge and two of the new IT hires were tearing through directories trying to figure out where the orchestration pulse had rerouted. They dug deep enough to find the config folder I'd left behind. Finally, they opened the text document titled Protocol Reminder. Inside, 4 lines. Checklist, revoke, acknowledge, relink, confirm. That was it. No password, no instructions, just the process. The one I trained Jorge on 2 years ago, the one I emailed Greg after every quarterly update, the one they all ignored because it wasn't flashy and didn't come with a slick UI. Now it was gospel. Too bad they were 19 hours late reading it. Brandon tried to reset the vendor keys again. Reauthorization failed. The system kicked back invalid steward. I imagine that's when he started sweating through his overpriced vest, because this wasn't a crash. It wasn't a breach. It was a contractual expiration ticking down like a sandglass they never knew was bleeding out. And me? I was watching the forecast roll in from the edge of a lake 2 hours outside the city. Feet in the water, no laptop, no phone on loud. Just silence, broken only by the distant panic of people who thought control was the same thing as ownership. It wasn't. It never was. Our 37 hit them like a dead engine on the freeway. Mid-sale, down payment loaded, signatures captured, buyer smiling, and then boom, the screen froze just before transaction finalization. A single red line flashed across the terminal. Payment gateway unavailable. Authorization expired. It wasn't a crash. It was a lockout. Brandon didn't even wait for IT this time. He rolled up his sleeves, shoved the finance intern out of the way, and logged into the admin panel himself, like some corporate cowboy who thought authority equals access. He clicked through menu after menu, breathing heavy, eyes darting like he was defusing a bomb. Then he hit submit. Access denied. Invalid key signature. He tried again. Different login. No luck. He called legal. At this point, Fox Lane's in-house counsel had dragged 3 interns into a windowless conference room, trying to piece together every active vendor agreement tied to the orchestration framework. The real one. Not the surface-level tools, but the bones. Licensing, payment APIs, secure key vaults, VIN sync systems, credit decision matrices. You know, the things that actually move the dealership forward. And there it was. Plain as day in the vendor logs. Platform steward. Renewal pending. Authority. M. Crane. My name. Still active, still untransferred. Because they never filled out the paperwork. Never clicked the final acknowledge and confirm button in the admin portal. Never thought the woman who just made things work actually held the foundation they were standing on. Vendor after vendor came back with the same error. Invalid signature. Authorization expired. The sales floor turned into a graveyard of half-finished deals. One customer walked out mid-process. Another refused to hand over the down payment until their finance confirmation came through, which of course it couldn't. Every API call hit the same wall. By hour 40, they were calling vendor reps directly. Most of those reps knew me. I'd worked with them during integration, testing, and compliance phases. I knew their kids' names, their dogs' allergies, their tech stack rotations. So when Brandon called, asking for overrides, most of them said some version of, "Sorry, we can't process without the steward." And just like that, the illusion cracked. Brandon's title meant nothing. Greg's ownership, nothing. They didn't own the keys. They just assumed someone like me would always be there to turn them. At hour 42, my phone rang. Greg. His number lit up on my screen like a ghost refusing to believe it's dead. I watched it ring. No voicemail, no second call. He probably thought I'd come running if he just acknowledged me long enough to make it seem human. But that ship had sunk the second he chose shrimp cocktails and empty speeches over the person keeping the engine running. He never understood the system because he never had to, because I never let it fail. Until now. 42 hours down, 8 to go. Hour 44, and I was sipping green tea in a hotel lounge across the state line when the email came in. Subject line, System Migration Proposal, Confidential. Sender, Laurel Chen, GM at Braxton Ridge Auto. It was brief, polite, and razor-sharp in intent. We're aware of the situation at Fox Lane. We'd like to discuss a complete rebuild under our roof. All stewardship rights preserved. Your discretion is assumed and appreciated. Laurel wasn't just fishing. She was ready to sign. She'd been the only GM I'd ever worked with who understood the value of infrastructure. Years ago, I'd helped her digitize her service ops. She noticed things like efficient script load times and uptime stats, the kind of leader who sent handwritten thank you notes and included line items for consulting extensions in her quarterly budgets. She'd watched what was happening at Fox Lane like a wolf watching a limping deer. I replied, "Available tomorrow, discretion guaranteed." Meanwhile, back at the Titanic, Fox Lane's customer service lines had gone into full cardiac arrest. Hold times ballooned to 40 minutes. Calls escalated from just checking on my appointment to, "Why is my car still sitting in your lot after I paid for it?" And "My bank says they never received the lien clearance." It turns out, the beautiful thing about orchestration platforms is that they don't shout when they fail. They just stop moving, like a heart that doesn't skip, doesn't warn, just flatlines. A 2024 Tahoe got sold to a retired Navy vet who'd driven 2 hours for pickup. Problem was, the lien release ping to the financing bank never triggered, and without that release, the DMV registration sync failed. Fox Lane's delivery team, poor kids who didn't know any better, showed up at the state DMV office expecting to drop off paperwork. Instead, they got turned away with a warning: unconfirmed lien. Vehicle must return to originating dealer. The customer? Furious. Brandon? Radio silent. Greg? Reportedly called a strategic pause on all outbound deliveries, which basically meant taping a neon sign to the wall that said, "We're bleeding." And through it all, I said nothing. No press release, no tweet, no whistleblower moment. Just silence. The kind of silence that fills a vacuum so completely you start hearing your own heartbeat. The kind that makes everyone else start talking, in whispers, then shouts, then panic. Lonnie texted again, "It's chaos. Are you really not coming back?" I didn't respond, because the truth was, this wasn't about coming back. It was about never needing to. The rebuild I'd quietly outlined 3 years ago, modular, fail-safe, vendor-flexible, would finally have a home where it wouldn't be dismissed as too complicated or just back-end stuff. And best of all, no ribbon cuttings, no staged toasts, no digital billboards with my name next to a man in a vest holding a champagne flute. Just a clean slate and a handshake with someone who actually understood what building meant. Hour 44, 6 to go. Hour 50 didn't explode. It didn't crash. It didn't fry servers or set off alarms. It just stopped. At exactly 9:14 a.m., the sync manager reached the end of its runtime like a candle that simply runs out of wick. One by one, modules handed off their final heartbeat. The scheduling system returned a blank field. Payroll queue froze in mid-roll. VIN registry pings timed out. The financing API went dark, and the orchestrator loop closed with a quiet timestamp in the logs. Protocol reached. External access expired. There were no alerts because I didn't build it to scream. I built it to listen, and it had heard enough. Greg's voicemail landed less than 10 minutes later. The voice that once called me essential now cracked like a rusted hinge. "We didn't mean to insult you. If this is about the party, it's all a misunderstanding. Just come in, please." He sounded tired, older, like a man realizing that the house he'd spent 20 years bragging about had been held together by bolts he never bothered to learn the names of. I played the message once, then deleted it. I replied by text, "System expired. You were informed." No punctuation, no extra words, just truth delivered in the language they'd ignored until it became consequence. At 1:37 p.m., I sat across from Laurel Chen in a sunlit conference room lined with whiteboards, plants, and people who weren't trying to gut their own support systems for bonus optics. The air smelled like eucalyptus and new beginnings. She slid the contract across the table. My framework, the full orchestration suite, minus the Fox Lane tags, would be rebuilt, modularized, and stewarded under a new structure. Full transparency, zero ownership games. And one little clause in the bottom margin I added with a smile: attendance at social events not required for employment or acknowledgement. Laurel chuckled when she saw it. "Deal," she said, and signed without blinking. No toasts, no speeches, no Greg holding up a glass while Brandon claps too hard. Just function. Just future. I walked out of that meeting without a photo op, without a press release, and without looking back. Hour 50 came and went, and so did I. 3 weeks later, someone forwarded me a screenshot from Fox Lane's homepage. Temporary closure for system overhaul. We appreciate your patience as we upgrade our internal infrastructure to better serve you. They used a stock photo of a smiling family picking up a car. The mother in the picture was holding a balloon, not shown, the dozen deals that died mid-finance. The customers turned away at the DMV, the service delays, the payment reversals, the vendors demanding breach fees, not shown. Greg sitting behind his desk, not making calls anymore. Not because he didn't want to, but because everyone who mattered had already stopped answering. I didn't reply to the message. 2 days after that, a dealership in Denton, Texas, not a mega brand, not a tech darling, just a tight-run, family-owned chain with ambition and respect, announced the launch of a proprietary orchestration suite designed to unify logistics, finance, inventory, and compliance into a single dynamic flow. They didn't name it after me, no big unveil, no spotlight. But down in the 4th paragraph of the press release, tucked beneath the integration partners and performance stats, was this line: System stewardship provided by M. Crane. Just that. No bio, no corporate headshot, no fake applause. That one sentence said everything. I built something real and someone finally treated it that way. Not as decor, not as some back-end voodoo, but as a pillar. I heard Brandon got reassigned. Business Optimization Strategy Advisor. That's what companies do when someone fails too loud to fire clean. They rename the position and slide it sideways. Rumor is he's sitting in a glass box at HQ trying to figure out a new CRM migration that doesn't even connect to half their hardware. Greg hasn't spoken publicly. Probably too proud. Or maybe just finally realizing that silence doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it becomes the report card you thought no one would read. As for me, I'm still working. Still stewarding, still building things no one sees until they stop working. And no, I'm still not going to your party. Turns out, systems don't need applause, just someone who understands what happens when no one's watching, and someone who refuses to let it fall.